In 2011, she stood at the altar wearing a tiara that Queen Elizabeth II had possessed for decades, but had never chosen to wear publicly herself. 14 years later, in December 2025, Catherine appeared in the Oriental Circlet, a dynastic relic created by Prince Albert, a piece traditionally reserved only for queens. Between these two moments lies far more than just the passage of time. It is a chronicle of immense trust. Today, we are going to open every jewelry box to trace this journey, from the personal gifts of Prince Philip to the forgotten treasures that lay in the vaults for a century. Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. Our story begins not with the monumental dynastic treasures that Catherine wears today, but with a period of initiation. In those early years, from 2011 to 2015, the late Queen began to share her collection with the new generation in a very careful, deliberate way. She granted access to lighter, more modest diadems, but simultaneously, and this is the fascinating part, she entrusted Catherine with items of profound sentimental value, jewels inextricably linked to her own youth and her marriage to Prince Philip. The very first chapter of this story was written on April 29, 2011. For her wedding day, Catherine wore the Cartier Halo Tiara. It is a relatively small, delicate piece, formed of 16 graduated scrolls, set with 739 brilliant and 149 baton diamonds. While it may seem modest compared to the grand diadems of state, its history is deeply personal to the Windsor family. The Duke of York, who would later become King George VI, purchased this tiara from Cartier in London in November 1936, just weeks before his brother's abdication changed their lives forever. He bought it for his wife Elizabeth, the future Queen Mother. Years later, in the spring of 1944, Queen Elizabeth gifted the halo tiara to her daughter, the then Princess Elizabeth, for her 18th birthday. It was a coming-of-age gift during wartime. However, the young Princess Elizabeth never wore this tiara in public. Instead, she frequently lent it to her sister, Princess Margaret, who wore it to the Queen's coronation in 1953 and later to her daughter, Princess Anne. By the time it was placed on Catherine's head, it had been sitting in the vault, unseen, for many years. There is a lovely detail about Catherine's wedding look that speaks to how she blends royal tradition with her own identity. To complement the scrolls of the halo tiara, she wore a pair of diamond earrings featuring a stylized acorn. This wasn't a random choice. The acorn is a motif from the Middleton family coat of arms. It was a subtle way of joining her past with her future. The Cartier halo was the perfect starter tiara. Elegant, not overpowering, yet firmly rooted in the main line of the royal family. But, as we shall see, Catherine's access to the Queen's personal history was about to become much more intimate. While the wedding tiara was a loan from the vault, another piece placed in Catherine's care carries the very essence of the late Queen's own early years as a monarch. I am speaking of the Bahrain pearl drop earrings. Their story takes us back to November 1947, to the wedding of Princess Elizabeth and Lieutenant Philip Mountbatten. Among the glittering array of gifts was a shell containing 7 large pearls, presented by the Hakim of Bahrain. It was a magnificent gesture. Shortly after the wedding, 2 of these lustrous pearls were selected to create a pair of earrings. They feature round diamond studs, from which round and baguette-cut diamonds are suspended, leading down to those historic pearl drops. The young Princess Elizabeth wore them constantly in the early years of her marriage. If you look at photographs from her 1951 tour of Canada, or the iconic portraits taken by Dorothy Wilding shortly after her accession, the very images used on postage stamps and banknotes for decades, you will see these earrings. They were the jewelry of a young woman stepping into a role of immense responsibility. Catherine began wearing them in 2016, notably for the Remembrance Sunday service, and later at Royal Ascot. There is something incredibly poignant about this visual link. When we see Catherine wearing them now, we are looking at the same pearls that framed the face of a young Queen Elizabeth II at the dawn of her reign. It is a quiet, dignified passing of the torch, an heirloom of youth transferred from one generation's matriarch to the next. The pearl earrings represented the queen's public image. The next piece, however, speaks of her private heart, a geometric treasure that remained exclusively hers for nearly 7 decades. The Edinburgh wedding bracelet is perhaps the most significant personal jewel Catherine has been trusted with during this period. Its value goes far beyond the carat weight of the diamonds. It is a testament to the romance between Elizabeth and Philip. When Prince Philip proposed in 1946, he was a naval officer without a vast fortune, but he possessed a royal heritage. His mother, Princess Alice of Battenberg, gave him a diamond and aquamarine tiara that she had received as a wedding gift in 1903 from her aunt and uncle, the last Tsar and Tsarina of Russia, Nicholas II and Alexandra Fyodorovna. Philip dismantled his mother's tiara to create the engagement ring for Elizabeth, but he didn't stop there. With the remaining diamonds, he helped design a bracelet as a wedding gift for his bride. He entrusted the work to Philip Antrobus of London. The result was a distinctively Art Deco piece, geometric and substantial, featuring 3 large white brilliant-cut diamonds set in platinum, connected by vertical sections and square links. It has a strength to it. Some might even call the design a bit masculine, reflecting the Duke's own taste. For 73 years of marriage, this bracelet was a staple of Her Majesty's wardrobe. She wore it for her official 25th wedding anniversary portrait and for her Diamond Jubilee portrait. It was hers, and hers alone. That is, until 2015. When Catherine appeared at the state banquet for the President of China wearing this bracelet, it was a moment that made royal jewel historians sit up and take notice. She wore it again to the BAFTAs in 2017. To trust the wife of your grandson with a gift designed by your husband, made from the diamonds of the Romanovs, that is a gesture of supreme approval. It was a clear signal that Catherine was no longer just a new member of the firm, she was family. While the bracelet was a constant presence, our next discovery takes us back to the Roaring '20s, reviving a delicate floral treasure that many believed had been retired forever. The lotus flower tiara offers a glimpse into a different era of royal style. Its origin story is quite charming. In 1923, the future King George VI gave his new wife, the Queen Mother, a diamond and pearl necklace from Gerard as a wedding gift. It was a lovely piece, featuring festoons and meander designs, but the Queen Mother evidently had other ideas. Just 6 months later, she returned to Gerard and had the necklace dismantled to create this tiara. It is a beautiful example of 1920s design, featuring lotus flower or papyrus motifs topped with diamond arches and pearls. In its early days, the Queen Mother wore it fashionably low across her forehead as a bandeau. In 1959, she passed it to Princess Margaret, who wore it often, and eventually, it was worn by Margaret's daughter-in-law, Serena Stanhope, at her wedding. After Margaret's death, the tiara returned to the royal vault, and silence fell over it. Many assumed it would never be seen again. Then, in December 2013, Catherine arrived at the annual diplomatic reception at Buckingham Palace. It was a dazzling surprise. The lotus flower was back. She wore it again for the state banquet in honor of the President of China in 2015, and revisited it as recently as 2022. This was a pivotal moment. By offering this specific piece, the Queen demonstrated a willingness to unlock a deeper layer of history for her granddaughter-in-law. Her Majesty was ready to let these sleeping beauties shine again, trusting Catherine to carry the weight of pieces that had slipped from public memory. But, as we know now, this was just the beginning. The true opening of the archives was yet to come. We have explored the quieter, deeply personal side of Catherine's early jewelry journey, those pieces that whispered of family connection. But now, I want to shift our focus to something entirely different. Let's call it the heavy artillery. The Queen began to unlock the vaults to pieces that don't just sparkle, they thunder. These are the jewels with century-old pedigrees, items worn by Queen Mary and Queen Alexandra that demonstrate the sheer, crushing majesty of the monarchy. The first major signal of this shift arrived in July 2017, during the state banquet for the King and Queen of Spain. It was a glittering evening, and when Catherine arrived, she was wearing a piece that took many observers by surprise. the Greville Ruby Necklace. This is a jewel with a formidable personality. Created by Boucheron in 1907, it was part of the legendary hoard left to the Queen Mother by the society hostess Mrs. Greville in 1942. The Queen Mother, who had an unapologetic passion for grand jewels, passed this specific piece to her daughter, Queen Elizabeth II, as a wedding present in 1947. It is a distinctive piece, a deep V shape of diamonds with rubies woven through a complex floral design. For decades, it was one of the late Queen's personal favorites. She wore it frequently in her younger years and continued to wear it throughout her reign. Seeing it on Catherine was a revelation. Catherine wore a gown with a deep neckline that evening, which allowed us to see the necklace's architecture perfectly, the way it sits wide on the collarbone and plunges down. It was a visual confirmation that she was now operating at the highest level of royal representation. Our next piece represents sheer, unadulterated value. I am speaking of the Nizam of Hyderabad necklace. This is, without exaggeration, the ultimate diamond loan. Its story begins in 1947, ahead of the future Queen's wedding. The Nizam of Hyderabad, then one of the richest men in the world, did not simply buy a gift. He left instructions with Cartier in London to let Princess Elizabeth choose whatever she wanted from their stock. She chose this magnificent piece, a pavé-set center with detachable double-drop pendants, incorporating 13 emerald-cut diamonds. It is a masterpiece of Cartier craftsmanship from the 1930s. Catherine has worn this necklace on rare, high-stakes occasions, such as the Portrait Gala in 2014 and a diplomatic reception in 2019. Seeing it on her is a reminder of the immense trust placed in her. Another necklace placed in Catherine's care takes us back even further, deep into the Victorian era, reviving a treasure that had been the pride of 3 queens. In October 2018, for the state banquet honoring the King and Queen of the Netherlands, Catherine wore Queen Alexandra's wedding necklace. This is royal history in its purest form. The necklace was part of a parure given by the Prince of Wales, the future King Edward VII, to Princess Alexandra of Denmark for their wedding in 1863. Just think about that date for a moment. 1863. This necklace witnessed the height of the Victorian Empire. It features large pearls surrounded by diamond clusters, connected by festoons of diamonds. It is classic, heavy, and imposing, a piece designed to be seen from the back of an opera box or the end of a ballroom. It became a firm favorite of the Queen Mother. She adored this necklace and wore it constantly, pairing it with her most substantial tiaras. She continued to wear it well into her 90s. The last recorded appearance was at a banquet in 1993. After that, silence fell. For 25 years, this magnificent piece remained unseen, locked away in the vaults. So, when Catherine walked into the ballroom at Buckingham Palace wearing it, it caused a genuine sensation among historians. It was a reminder that the collection is not a museum exhibit, but a living, breathing wardrobe. And seeing it on Catherine, one couldn't help but wonder, was this a subtle nod to her future title? After all, this was the wedding necklace of a very famous Princess of Wales. Amidst these grand statements of diamonds and pearls, there is a quieter, geometric treasure that Catherine has adopted during this period. It's a piece that requires us to look away from the neckline and focus on the wrist, revealing the styling genius of Queen Mary. I am referring to Queen Mary's diamond choker bracelet. This is a quintessential Art Deco piece from the 1920s, sleek, linear, and incredibly modern for its time. Originally, as the name suggests, this was not a bracelet at all. It was one of several diamond chokers belonging to Queen Mary. If you know anything about Queen Mary, you know she believed that more is more. She would often wear this choker as part of a stack of necklaces, creating an armor of diamonds that covered her from collarbone to chin. After Queen Mary's death, the piece vanished from public view for decades. It wasn't until 1975 that we saw it again, this time on the Queen Mother for her 75th birthday portraits. By then, it had been converted into a bracelet. It's a clever modification, transforming a rigid neck ornament into a flexible, wearable piece for the wrist. Catherine has worn this piece on several occasions since 2015. Seeing it on her brings a touch of 1920s Art Deco glamour to the modern era. It is a direct link to Queen Mary, a woman who understood the power of jewelry better than anyone, now resting elegantly on Catherine's wrist. By the end of 2018, the scope of trust placed in Catherine was undeniable. She had been entrusted with the full spectrum of the royal collection, ranging from intimate personal tokens to items of staggering historical and financial value. But alongside these dynastic loans, she began to navigate a collection that carried a different kind of weight, the iconic jewels inseparable from the memory of her husband's mother. And that brings us to a chapter filled with both sparkle and poignancy. This is a delicate line to walk. Wear Diana's jewelry too often, and you risk looking like a copy. Refuse to wear it, and you ignore a beloved legacy. Catherine mastered this balance, taking iconic pieces associated with her mother-in-law and quietly, respectfully making them her own. The foundation of this visual identity is, of course, the sapphire engagement ring. By now, we all know the story of this ring. It is arguably the most famous piece of jewelry in the world. But it is worth remembering that when the future King Charles proposed to Lady Diana Spencer in 1981, this wasn't a custom-made royal heirloom hidden away for centuries. It was selected from a Garrard catalog. The design features a 12-carat Ceylon sapphire surrounded by diamonds, inspired by a brooch Prince Albert gave to Queen Victoria before their wedding in 1840. Diana chose it herself. She loved it so much that she continued to wear it even after her divorce, right up until the end of her life. When Prince William placed this ring on Catherine's finger in 2010, it began a new chapter. Since then, it has been Catherine's constant companion. She wears it for nearly all royal engagements, formal or casual, with the rare exception of occasions that require her to be physically active. It has become a permanent fixture of her image, a constant thread connecting the past to the future. Alongside the ring, there is another recognizable heirloom from Diana's collection that we now associate closely with Catherine: the Collingwood pearl drop earrings. These earrings were a wedding gift to Diana from the jewelers at Collingwood. Interestingly, the firm originally wanted to gift Diana a diamond necklace to go with them, but the palace reportedly cautioned that such a lavish set would be too extravagant for the occasion. So, the necklace was returned, but the diamond and pearl earrings remained. They were a familiar part of Diana's style, and over time, they have naturally become part of Catherine's as well. She wears them often, from garden parties to formal state occasions. On her, they do not feel like historic relics or symbolic gestures, but simply like well-loved pieces. In this quiet, unspoken way, she keeps Diana's presence alive, not through statements or speeches, but through continuity. There is also a second pair that has become a key part of this collection: the South Sea pearl earrings. Featuring a distinctive diamond horseshoe design, these were a staple of Diana's later years. She even wore the diamond studs alone for her final official engagement at Swan Lake. Catherine revived them for the BAFTAs and, most notably, for the coronation in 2023. Interestingly, she appears to use different, slightly smaller pearl drops than Diana did, subtly tailoring the proportions to her own taste. While these earrings are a go-to for standard royal engagements, Catherine's choice of headwear for state occasions addresses a much more complex legacy. I am talking, of course, about the Lover's Knot tiara. Since 2015, this has become Catherine's primary diadem. If there is a diplomatic reception or a major state banquet, this is the piece we expect to see. The history of this tiara goes back to 1913, when Queen Mary commissioned Garrard to create a copy of a tiara owned by her grandmother, the Duchess of Cambridge. Queen Elizabeth II wore it frequently in the 1950s. It frames the face beautifully with its 19 Oriental pearl drops suspended from diamond lover's knot bows. But in 1981, she loaned it to Diana. Diana wore it often, but she had a complicated relationship with this piece. She famously complained that it was heavy and induced terrible headaches. There is also a distinct feature to this tiara. The pearls are not fixed, they swing. Diana reportedly found the noise of the swinging pearls distracting and the weight oppressive. Yet, look at Catherine. Since she began wearing it in 2015, she has worn it with an air of complete ease. What was heavy and noisy for Diana seems to rest lightly on her daughter-in-law. It serves as a fascinating contrast. Where one found discomfort, the other found her signature piece, turning a challenging tiara into a symbol of steadiness. In December 2022, Catherine made a choice that reminded us of a much edgier moment in royal fashion history. For the Earthshot Prize ceremony in Boston, she stepped out wearing the Art Deco emerald choker. This necklace has a journey that spans the empire. The emeralds were originally a gift to Queen Mary from the ladies of India during the Delhi Durbar in 1911. 10 years later, in 1921, Mary, always with an eye for modernization, had the stones remodeled into the sleek Art Deco choker. The Queen later loaned the piece to Diana, who wore it during her tour of Australia in 1985. At one point, she chose to wear it not around her neck, but across her forehead, in a way that was entirely her own. The image became one of the most memorable of that tour and reflected Diana's instinctive, unconventional approach to style. Catherine, in contrast, returned the jewel to its original purpose. She wore it as a choker with a green evening gown, acknowledging its history and its connection to the Princess of Wales title. It was a quiet, respectful reference to the past, interpreted in her own restrained and careful way. As the royal family moved through a period marked by illness and loss, jewelry was chosen with particular care and restraint. In these moments, Catherine often relied on a traditional and appropriate choice: the 4-row Japanese pearl choker. The necklace was commissioned by Queen Elizabeth II in the early 1980s, using cultured pearls she had received from the Japanese government during a state visit in 1975. Garrett created the piece with 4 strands and a curved diamond clasp. It was later loaned to Diana in 1982 for a banquet at Hampton Court Palace. Catherine first wore the choker in 2017 at the Queen and Prince Philip's 70th wedding anniversary dinner. In April 2021, Catherine chose the necklace for the funeral of the Duke of Edinburgh, held under pandemic restrictions. The image of her arriving in a black mask and 4 strands of pearls reflected the tone of the day: subdued, respectful, and restrained. When Queen Elizabeth II died in September 2022, Catherine wore the same necklace again for the state funeral. By returning to the same piece, she maintained a sense of consistency in moments of loss, in keeping with royal custom. Following the death of Queen Elizabeth II, Catherine's role changed overnight. She was no longer the Duchess of Cambridge, she was the Princess of Wales. And for her first state visit under this new title, she selected a jewel that served as a literal badge of office. In November 2022, welcoming the President of South Africa, she debuted the Prince of Wales Feathers brooch. This piece goes back to the very first Princess of Wales of the modern era, Alexandra of Denmark. It was a wedding gift to her in 1863 from the Ladies of North Wales. The design is heraldic, featuring the ostrich feathers of the Prince of Wales encircled by diamonds and emeralds, with a detachable emerald drop. The Queen Mother gave this piece to Diana upon her engagement in 1981. Diana famously wore it as a pendant on a necklace, often pairing it with her emeralds. Later, Queen Camilla wore it in its original form as a brooch. When Catherine wore it in 2022, she was following a clear tradition associated with the title. The Prince of Wales Feathers brooch has long been linked to the role, and her choice reflected continuity with those who had held it before her. With the dawn of a new reign, there was uncertainty about how the royal vaults would be managed. Over the last 3 years, however, many have noted how Queen Camilla has shifted the approach, aligning it closer to continental royal families like the Dutch, where heirlooms circulate more freely. But the most significant outcome is the access granted to the Princess of Wales. King Charles and Queen Camilla have opened the archives for Catherine far wider than anyone could have imagined. The first clear sign of continuity appeared in the official coronation portrait of King Charles III and Queen Camilla, released in May 2023. In this historic image, Catherine is wearing the George VI festoon necklace. The story of this necklace goes back to 1950, when King George VI asked Garrod to create a new piece using 105 loose diamond collets from the royal vaults. The result was a substantial 3-row festoon necklace, both elegant and impressive in scale. Queen Elizabeth II was particularly fond of this necklace. She wore it frequently for state visits and the state opening of Parliament, and over time it became closely associated with her public image. For decades, it was one of her most recognizable pieces. By wearing this necklace in the first official portrait of the new reign, Catherine drew a quiet connection to that history. It was a natural and respectful link between generations, a piece commissioned by her grandfather-in-law, worn for many years by the late Queen, and now part of her own royal role. For nearly a century, jewel watchers had whispered about the Strathmore Rose tiara. Was it broken? Was it dismantled? Was it lost? It was originally a wedding gift to Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, the future Queen Mother, from her father, the Earl of Strathmore, in 1923. It is a delicate, floral piece purchased from Catchpole and Williams. In the 1920s, the young Duchess of York famously wore it low across her forehead, bandeau style. But after the 1930s, it simply vanished. It had not been seen in public for almost 100 years. Then, in November 2023, the ballroom doors opened for the Korean state banquet, and there it was. Catherine had brought the Sleeping Beauty back to life. The reappearance of the Strathmore Rose was a delightful surprise for royal watchers. It is the piece inextricably linked to the legacy of the Queen Mother. Being entrusted with such a sentimental heirloom, Catherine brought a significant piece of family history back into the light. It was an appearance that thrilled historians, proving that under the new reign, these treasures are not lost, but simply waiting for the right occasion. For the royal wedding in Jordan in June 2023, Catherine chose the Greville diamond chandelier earrings. These are not subtle jewels. Created by Cartier between 1918 and 1929, they display a lexicon of diamond cuts, pears, baguettes, emerald cuts, and trapezes, all cascading in a waterfall of light. They were part of the Greville bequest to the Queen Mother, who then gave them to Princess Elizabeth as a wedding present in 1947. It is worth remembering that these earrings were a staple for the young Queen Elizabeth II in the 1950s. She wore them constantly for state visits and galas. Personally, I am thrilled to see them on Catherine. They are massive, heavy pieces that demand a certain presence, yet they are absolutely stunning. Seeing them back in rotation is a wonderful reminder of the glamour of the early Elizabethan era. All of these appearances, the diamonds of George VI, the floral jewels of the Queen Mother, and the Greville chandeliers, gradually led to a very particular moment. It came on 3 December 2025 at the state banquet in honor of the President of Germany. For this occasion, Catherine wore the Oriental Circlet tiara. The tiara was designed in 1853 for Prince Albert for Queen Victoria. It was originally set with opals and was later remodeled by Queen Alexandra, who replaced them with rubies. The design, with its distinctive arches and Eastern-inspired motifs, has remained one of the most recognizable in the royal collection. For many years, this was closely associated with the Queen Mother, who wore it frequently. It is one of the so-called crown heirlooms, pieces traditionally worn by Queen's consort and Queen's regnant. Seeing it worn by Catherine was a notable moment. It marked a new level of trust and inclusion, and it was a generous gesture on the part of Queen Camilla to make such an important piece available to her. On Catherine, the tiara looked entirely natural, a historic jewel worn with quiet confidence. What a journey it has been! We have traced the path from that first delicate sparkle of the Cartier halo in 2011 to the majestic grandeur of the Oriental Circlet in 2025. It is fascinating to watch how the collection has opened up for Catherine, first through the careful loans of the late Queen, and now through the generosity of King Charles and Queen Camilla. This evolution isn't just about carat weight. It mirrors Catherine's own path within the family, steadily gaining confidence and earning the trust to wear the pieces that define the monarchy's history. Personally, I find it incredibly exciting to see these vaults opening up. It feels like history is coming alive again right before our eyes. But I want to hear from you. Which of these debuts surprised or delighted you the most? Was it the unexpected return of the Strathmore Rose? Or seeing the Oriental Circlet back in rotation? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Royal Jewel Box, please leave a like. It really supports the channel and helps me share these stories with more people. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next investigation. Thank you for spending this time with me.